A public ceremony set to be held for Jacques Chirac today in Paris, a giant of French politics, twice president, twice prime minister, and 18 years as a mayor of Paris. He opposed the Iraq War, championed a united Europe of states. His tenure also marred by numerous scandals. We'll take a look back at his mixed legacy and speak to a reporter at Les Invalides. Hello there, and thank you for joining us on this special report at France 24. This Sunday, there will be a public service for former French President Jacques Chirac. The ceremony will be held at Invalides, the French Military Museum. Chirac passed away Thursday at the age of 86. He was one of France's most beloved figures. We'll look now at some of the key moments.
On Thursday, the Eiffel Tower gone dark to mourn Jacques Chirac. Photos of the late former president projected onto the facade of Paris's City Hall. Before visiting the Chirac family to pay his respects, President Emmanuel Macron paid homage in a nationally televised address.
Tonight, we feel gratitude for Jacques Chirac. He did so much for our nation, for our values, for brotherhood and for tolerance.
At both the Élysée Palace and City Hall, citizens lined up Friday to sign memorial books for the man who was Paris's mayor for 18 years and president of the Republic for 12.
I remember Chirac first as mayor, and he was exceptional. Elected 3 times, the last time winning all 20 districts. When we went abroad and said we were from Paris, people would say, "Ah, Chirac."
On Saturday, the capital's Quai Branly Museum, devoted to indigenous art, opened to the public free of charge in honor of the man for whom it was a centerpiece of his cultural legacy. Here, too, a book for visitors to leave their memories of a president who became the first to acknowledge France's role in the Holocaust and who declined to join the U.S. in its invasion of Iraq.
He was a statesman who refused war, who acknowledged our involvement in the horrors of the past.
Chirac will be laid to rest in Montparnasse Cemetery Monday during a day of national mourning.
All right, now let's speak to our reporter, James Andre, standing by at Les Invalides. James, today there's a public ceremony. Tell us a bit more about what we'll be seeing.
Well, what we will be seeing here at Les Invalides is basically the cask of Jacques Chirac that will be displayed here inside this building behind me. This was a hospital built by Napoleon back in his day to take care of the soldiers that were wounded on the different fronts of battle. As you can see behind me, there are already some people queuing. Several thousand people are expected here. And what I can also tell you is that, well, a hearse est à Route Tournon as we speak. That is the apartment where Jacques Chirac lived, so the hearse is already there, so we can expect to see this cask. Basically, it's supposed to arrive at 2 p.m. There aren't that much details. What we can imagine is that people will be coming here, will be let inside, then the memorial books that were at the Élysée Palace will be set here so that people can leave a message and sign these registers.
Yeah, and James, those memorial books, you were covering that for France 24. 3 days of people queuing outside the Élysée Palace to leave their condolences. What did some of the people say that you spoke to about Jacques Chirac?
Well, many people said that to them he was like a part of the family. It's true that he was a president for 12 years. He was also a prime minister twice. He was an elected official from 1967 to 2007 for 40 straight years without interruption. So needless to say that indeed he was very much a home name here in France. He was an important persona, and it was interesting to see what people said. Some people were telling me that they believed that his political legacy was extremely important, that they felt that he had accomplished much for France. Others, and that was a majority, were talking to me about how personable he was. Jacques Chirac was beloved by the French very much because of his attitude, for example, at the Salon de l'Agriculture, where he would go every year, pat the backside of drive cows, drink beer. He was a man who loved food. He loved tête de veau, veal head, which is a speciality here in France. And indeed, people related to him a lot. Now, of course, some people were also telling me that they were on the opposite side of the political spectrum, that they didn't feel close to Jacques Chirac, that they were unhappy in 1995 when he did the last nuclear tests in Mururoa near Tahiti, that they did not agree politically with him and that they did not like the shady part of his heritage, the fact that indeed he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Those were suspended years, but still it's the once that it happened to a French president. But in any case, these people were also telling me that they were attached to this personality, that of course the image of Jacques Chirac was also built through the media, through satire, obviously the Guignol de l'Info, which were very, very well known here in France and followed where he was one of the most popular characters. Probably the cutest thing I heard at the Élysée Palace was a young boy who told me that he had written in the book, well, Jacques Chirac, I wish you a great holiday with Jesus. So that was probably the cutest thing we actually heard as we were covering that part of this memorial. It's important to note that nearly 5,000 people went to sign these registers between Thursday and Sunday. So you can say it was quite a success, and the atmosphere was very dignified in the courtyard of the Élysée. And these books are going to be here now, so you can expect many more messages for Jacques Chirac.
And that big turnout, that bears out in a poll that was published in the Journal du Dimanche newspaper that said that Jacques Chirac was tied with Charles de Gaulle as France's most beloved president. And much like de Gaulle, Chirac was an imposing figure physically and symbolically in French politics.
Yes, absolutely. And this is what the people right behind me were telling me. I just spoke to a young man called Fabien. He is the first in line. He's been here since 8:15 this morning. He is there with a friend, and they both told me that they had missed the opportunity to sign these books at the Élysée Palace, but they did not want to miss the opportunity to be here. They said it was very important. Fabien is engaged politically. He is part of a right-wing party, the Radical Party, and he said that basically Jacques Chirac was the inspiration for him to join politics. Now, he also said that to him, well, he was, the greatest president since Charles de Gaulle. That is something that comes back a lot of people were telling me this, and it is very much due to his persona, to his personality, to the way he engaged with the French. Now, of course, both men did not have the same destiny politically. One was the war hero. Jacques Chirac was not, of course. He governed in a time of peace, but still he was, as you said, an imposing figure. And of course you've got to remember that we are just after his death, and that of course has a massive impact on how people feel about him right now. It's important to remember that at some stages in his political career he was vastly unpopular. So it is very much the Chirac effect, Chirac death effect that has this influence on people, and it would be interesting to have had the same question asked to the French people 6 months ago or in a couple of years' time.
And James, the tribute's yet to get underway today where you are, but tell us a bit about what we'll be seeing Monday.
Well, Monday is going to be the official day of tribute. It will start here, actually, right behind me. There will be a military ceremony at 9:30. That is private. That's for the family, and it will be held here inside the Invalides. That is something quite traditional for statesmen or important politicians here in France. Then there will be another service at 12 a.m., a service that will be held at Saint-Sulpice Church, because, of course, Notre-Dame de Paris is not available due to the fire that ravaged it earlier this year. But some 30 heads of states and prime ministers are expected at that service, including Vladimir Putin of Russia. So it's going to be a very important official affair. And then Jacques Chirac will be laid in his final resting place, but that will be in strict family intimacy, we are told, and that will be at the Montparnasse Cemetery, right next to where his daughter Laurence lays. She died a few years ago. She was 58 and fought with a disease. She was a very important person in Jacques Chirac's life, and this is where he will be laid to rest.
All right, thank you very much, James. James Andre reporting from Les Invalides. Meanwhile, people have been buying Chirac memorabilia in his home region of Corrèze in southwestern France. Pierre Delroux takes a look at that.
It's far, but it's beautiful. This is Corrèze. Quite a few phrases and expressions were coined by Jacques Chirac throughout his career and have since become part of popular culture. For this shop, the late president's popularity is a source of business.
This t-shirt is one of our best sellers. It's a Barack Obama Hope poster-inspired logo, but with Chirac in blue, white, red, and a tribute to his homeland, this is Corrèze.
T-shirts, posters, and stickers, Jacques Chirac's face is virtually everywhere here. And since the announcement of his passing, orders have been piling up, and many seem to want a piece of memorabilia to remember the former president by.
It affected me like everyone else, as I always passed by the shop, and until now I'd only gone in for a quick browse. But now it makes me want to have a souvenir of Chirac.
The year he was first elected was the year I arrived in France, so for me it was very significant. I witnessed the celebrations around this man who was very close to the people. At least that was the impression I had at that time, when I didn't speak French very well.
The brand Ici c'est la Corrèze was created 5 years ago by Pierre Blanc with the blessing of the Chirac family. Former First Lady Bernadette Chirac was actually one of the first proud owners of a Jacques Chirac t-shirt, and their daughter Claude reportedly owns an apron with her father's face on it. It's all in good fun, but also for a good cause, as for every sale, the brand gives 50 cents to the Chirac Foundation, which finances conflict prevention programs around the world.
Well, during his time in the Élysée, Jacques Chirac was a president who sought to project himself on the international stage, from Iraq to the Ivory Coast. But closer to home, he often struggled to make France's presence felt. Colin Kennebra takes a look at Chirac's mixed record in European affairs.
He started off on an assertive note. Picking up from his predecessor, François Mitterrand, Jacques Chirac sought to project France's influence on Europe's periphery, sending troops to keep the peace in the Balkans. In 1995, it was in Paris that the treaty was signed to end the Bosnian War. 4 years later, French forces were back in the region as part of the NATO intervention in Kosovo. But at the heart of the EU, Chirac struggled to make himself heard. One factor, flagging relations with Germany. Another, a series of defeats for EU treaties, starting with the 2001 Treaty of Nice. Marred by disputes between France and Germany, the treaty was ultimately rejected by Irish voters, who refused to ratify it in a popular referendum. A prelude to another, more dramatic referendum defeat for Chirac and the EU. In 2005, it was French voters who turned against the Union's constitutional treaty, drafted by elder statesman Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. 55% of voters refused to ratify the treaty, despite both Chirac's right-wing UMP and the left-wing Socialist Party campaigning in favor.
A majority of you rejected the European Constitution. It is your sovereign decision, and I am taking it into account.
A blow that the 12-year president struggled to recover from, earning him harsh words from his successor, Nicolas Sarkozy, who dubbed Chirac the lazy king.
Well, Jacques Chirac was often described as a friend of the Arab world, a region where he was widely popular. However, to some critics, what was often termed his Arab policy lacked in principles and logic.
Jacques Chirac in 1996, visiting the old city of Jerusalem. His Israeli bodyguards at one point step in to block him from Palestinian well-wishers. The president, in an extraordinary television moment, loses his temper.
Want me to go back to my plane and go back to France? Is that what you want? Then let them go and let them do. No, that's no problem. No, this is not a method. This is a provocation. That is provocation. It's not a provocation. Please, you stop now.
Chirac, with all that, was hailed as a hero in the Arab world. His popularity grew with his resounding no to the US-led invasion of Iraq.
Whatever the circumstances, France will vote no, because we believe that there is no need to wage war to reach the objective we have set ourselves, that is, the disarmament of Iraq.
But Jacques Chirac also disappointed Arabs, as with his talks with the then Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon in 2005. He stayed mum on the building of the Israeli-Palestinian wall and on pushing the peace process. Some critics say, when it came to the Arab world, his only policy was to maintain the status quo.
His knowledge of the Arab world focused more on its leaders than its people. Leaders who were autocrats or dictators. He focused more on them, on maintaining their power, instead of addressing the people's well-being.
His policy with respect to Syria and Lebanon centred on the fate of his friend, former Lebanese President Rafik Hariri. In 2000, he was the only Western leader to attend the funeral of the Syrian President Hafez al-Assad. 5 years later, Rafik Hariri was assassinated. With suspicions focused on Syria, Jacques Chirac openly split with its new leader, Assad's son, Bashar. Such changes in position ultimately made his so-called Arab policy difficult to discern.
So mixed political legacy, but in the cultural world, he is regarded more kindly, best remembered for Paris's Quai Branly Museum, which he opened in 2006. Luc Frigo has the story.
It was the moment when his long-time pet project came to life. In June 2006, then President Jacques Chirac inaugurated the Musée du Quai Branly, a museum celebrating non-Western cultures. Designed by French architect Jean Nouvel, it was built to the tune of €250 million.
It is an incomparable aesthetic experience, and at the same time, an indispensable lesson on humanity at this moment in time, because there is no more of a hierarchy between arts and culture than there is between different nations.
With more than 1 million visitors every year, the museum dedicated to indigenous art and cultures of Africa, Asia, Oceania and the Americas has become a major Parisian landmark. Chirac also pushed for decentralizing culture, bringing museums and events outside the French capital. In 2004, he chose the northern industrial city of Lens to host the Louvre's first regional branch.
He was very intelligent. I liked him a lot as a president.
He was a man very close to the public. And I remember him especially as a big promoter of cultural diversity.
Chirac's other cultural footprints include the National Museum of Immigration History. He started the project in earnest soon after a shock 2002 presidential election, when the far-right National Front leader Jean-Marie Le Pen reached the second round. In the years following the 2003 US invasion of Iraq, which Chirac fiercely opposed, the president was keen to showcase France's soft power diplomacy, trying to bridge the gap between East and West through the arts. Chirac opened a department of Islamic art at the Louvre, which was later enlarged into a separate wing. He was also instrumental in the creation of the Louvre Abu Dhabi, the museum's first foreign franchise.
President Chirac, apart from the financing of the project, was very proud of this museum because it was completely in line with his philosophy. For our country, international affairs and cultural affairs should be aligned.
A connoisseur of Japanese and Chinese arts and literature, Chirac was also known for his love of sumo wrestling. Between 2000 and 2007, an official award dubbed the Chirac Trophy was given to a tournament champion every year.
Well, moving on to other news. In Austria, Sebastian Kurz's Conservatives have a large lead in opinion polls, but they're still expected to need a coalition partner if they win today's parliamentary elections, and it's unclear who that may be. The former Chancellor's party has ignored recent scandals that eroded its support. Instead, it's campaigned on its core issue of migration, railing against immigrants. Now, Anthony Mills reports from Vienna.
His party and Sebastian Kurz himself, they're going to be very pleased with the polls going into this election. And I think there's absolutely no doubt in their quarter that they're going to come out first. They're going to be dominant and that they're most likely going to win votes and do better even than last time. Nonetheless, Sebastian Kurz and the party are going to be in a tricky situation in terms of those negotiations, because on the one hand, if they go into a coalition with the far right, which is expected to lose a number of percentage points, although its support isn't expected to cave in. If he goes into negotiations with them and they join a government again, there are going to be people, possibly even in his own camp, who are going to say, look, this is risky. What happens if there's another scandal and the government comes down again? That could irreparably damage his reputation. At the same time, he's not expected to go into a coalition with the Social Democrats, because the perception in Austria is that under its current leadership, that's going to be a stain on his reputations, because it's going to be seen as more of the same, a sort of a standstill coalition government. He may be looking, of course, at a coalition with the Green Party, whose support is expected to surge from below 4% last time around to possibly even above 12%. There's real focus, of course, on Green Party themes. We've seen that with the climate protests, and they're expected to do very well. So he may look at a coalition with them and with a smaller liberal party, the Neos, which is expected to come in at about 8%, possibly a three-way tie-up for stability in his view in terms of numbers. But of course, as we know, three-party coalitions, whether in Austria or elsewhere, are often far from stable.
Well, Afghanistan held elections of its own on Saturday, with the biggest issue in the country plainly visible and marring the poll: violence. The defense ministry said 68 attacks were carried out against election sites, and this despite authorities placing Kabul under partial lockdown, flooding streets with troops and banning trucks from entering the capital. Brian Quinn reports.
Tight security amid Saturday's voting in Afghanistan. The capital, Kabul, closed to truck traffic as authorities sought to prevent bomb attacks that had been promised by the Taliban. With over 70,000 security personnel deployed nationwide, violence appears to have been limited compared to previous elections. Many voters expressed their satisfaction with the process.
This is my first time voting in the presidential election. I'm voting because I want to choose a leader who is pious and educated.
But there were incidents. Dozens of casualties were reported amid attacks in the north and south of the country. In Kandahar, at least 15 were wounded in a bomb attack during voting at a local mosque.
When the polling station opened, some voters came in and cast their votes. Suddenly there was an explosion, and after that I don't remember anything.
Turnout across the country reported low. Accusations of fraud and misconduct widespread. Biometric sensors intended to prevent fraud often malfunctioned or failed in the hands of undertrained staff. A policy of photographing each voter resonated poorly, particularly among female populations in highly conservative areas. The campaign saw current President Ashraf Ghani face off against his bitter rival, Chief Executive Abdullah, in a contest dominated by failed peace talks between the Taliban and the U.S. government. Citizens won't know the final results before early November. Concerns abound that inconclusive results could lead to deepening chaos in a country already scarred by decades of war.
In a speech before the United Nations General Assembly, the Syrian foreign minister demanded the immediate withdrawal of all U.S. and Turkish troops from his country. He also rejected two allies' plans to create a so-called safe zone. James Wilson reports.
Syria's foreign minister had a tough message for American and Turkish troops at the UN.
Any foreign forces operating in our territories without our authorization are occupying forces and must withdraw immediately. Should they refuse, we have the right to take any and all countermeasures authorized under international law.
Washington and Ankara are pressing ahead with the formation of a so-called safe zone along Turkey's border with Syria. It means US-backed Syrian Kurdish fighters will not be allowed near Turkey's border. The Turkish fighters might be America's allies, but Ankara considers them to be terrorists. The deal will appease Turkey's President Erdogan. He plans to settle 1 million Syrian refugees in the zone. But it was a stark reminder to Damascus that much of Syria is still out of its control. Kurdish rebels still rule a part of the oil-rich northeast, and Turkish and US troops have begun joint air and land patrols along the Syrian border. Testimony to the fact that Syria's 8-year civil war is far from over.
Pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong are marking this Sunday as Global Anti-Totalitarianism Day. Those are some of the latest images coming in Police have fired pepper spray to break up protesters in the Causeway Bay shopping district. Protesters, many clad in black and carrying umbrellas, also holding pro-democracy protesters and chanting songs. They took over a stretch of road over 1 kilometer long and headed toward the government office complex. Activists are angry about what they see as China's growing influence on the semi-autonomous region, and tension is mounting ahead of China's National Day on Tuesday. Well, police in Poland said at least 30 people were detained when clashes broke out before a gay rights parade in the city of Lublin. The nationalist ruling party had called LGBT ideology an invasive foreign influence and has made it a key issue in its campaign ahead of next month's elections.
In the city of Lublin in eastern Poland, gay rights activists marched, calling for equality. They were met by jeering and obscene gestures from passerbys.
Every day we cannot be openly bisexual, transsexual, lesbian or gay. We have to hide it, and today is the only day of the year when we can openly show who we love.
But many people in Poland do not approve of open expressions of love between LGBTQI people. During the march, a large group of anti-gay protesters moved in and tried to stop the parade, but the police intervened and made arrests. Poland's population is predominantly Catholic and conservative, and the ruling party Law and Justice considers the rights of gay people a threat to traditional Polish families.
No one is hitting them, no one is kicking them, no one is hunting them, but we will not allow a deviant relationship between two men to be considered family or a married couple.
Homosexuality in Poland is not illegal, but same-sex marriage is forbidden. When it comes to rights and protections for LGBTQI people, Poland ranks last, tied with Latvia, among the EU's member states.
And we'll have continuous coverage of the public ceremony for Jacques Chirac today here on France 24. But that's the news for now. Please stay tuned.
French wine is arguably one of the best things about France. And some say it's the best in the world, although that's debatable. But one thing's for sure is that wine is an art form in France. It's an integral part of our culture and a thriving industry.
But just why does French wine have such a great reputation? What's the trick to getting a really good bottle? And what are the latest trends?
Join us for this episode of French Connections Plus, where we savor the wonderful world of French wine.
French Connections Plus, presented by Jeannie Godula and Florence Villeneuve.